Hey guys, it's Sam here. It's been a little bit over 3 years since the release of The Intruder, and oh my god, the feedback I've gotten about it has been absolutely incredible. I mean, seriously, for a community map for a 10-year-old game, like, I could not have expected this level of support, so thank you. Anyway, I was bored, so I thought that it might be cool for me to sort of play through it with you and give a little bit of an insight as to the behind the scenes and the development process of this map alongside some of the stuff that I feel like I could have done better. So, without further ado, let's get started.
Cave Johnson again. Just a heads up, we've got an interverse security breach in one of the test areas. You all enjoyed a good chuckle at Cave's expense when I started monitoring for parallel universe invasions. You all tried to stop me when I tried to garnish your wages to build defenses against said invasion. Succeeded, too. So, I hope you're happy. You've got a bogey from Earth 1 loose on the premises. Go write a letter to the Better Business Bureau about that, why don't you? Actually, don't.
So, if you're not familiar, every map from the Portal 2 Puzzle Maker begins with one of these Cave Johnson lines. Now, usually they're automatically chosen by the game when you're playing through it based on what other lines have played, etc. But I wanted to force one here because of the sort of extreme nature of the map. I didn't feel like it would fit to just have a random line chosen. So I was going through the list of lines that are available, and I came across this one. And honestly, I could not have asked for a better line. I completely lucked out there. It fits perfectly, to the point where I even had people asking me like how I made the line, if it were an impressionist or anything like that. But no, it's a completely stock line from the game. I just lucked out in that. So, anyway, we come into here. And we've got this area. Now, way back when, I sort of graduated, if you would call it, from the Puzzle Maker and started making hammer maps. I had this idea to basically bait people into thinking they were playing a Puzzle Maker map and then scare the shit out of them. And I attempted it once before. It did not go well. I'm not telling you the name of that map because I really don't want anyone playing it. If you really want to play it, you can find it on my Steam Workshop. It's bad. But this was my second attempt at that, and I think it worked out a lot better. So this first area, I took a lot of steps to make it feel like a Puzzle Maker map. So the approach that I took was I actually started by making this area in the Puzzle Maker and then exporting it into Hammer. Big mistake, because if you've ever done it before, you'll know that the geometry that the Puzzle Maker exports is borderline completely unusable. So, it was a real pain to work with in Hammer. If I were ever to remaster this, I would probably just make it from scratch in Hammer and then try to make it look like the Puzzle Maker. But anyway, that's how this opening segment was done. So, first of all, first step is to spawn this cube over here, and this is where the first sort of major problem comes in. Now, normally, you spawn the cube like that, right? But a lot of people, as it turns out, decide to come over here first, and then they spawn the cube, and you'll notice the cube blocks the laser here. And as soon as I pick it up, whoops! So you have to turn off the laser first, and it just becomes a pain. A solution to this, and I actually did this in the second version of the test chamber, is to move the receptacle one slot to the left over here. But the thing is, that's half a voxel, and you can't do that in the Puzzle Maker. And again, I was trying to be really authentic to the Puzzle Maker here, so I didn't do that. In retrospect, I probably should have done that. Same thing here. I probably should not have made this wall portalable for a variety of reasons, which you'll see in a second, but the main one is that everyone attempted, or at least some people, attempted to do a fling here, which went about as well as you can expect. So, probably should have made that black as well. And that would have fixed another oversight here, where the intended solution here is to block the laser and then come up here and get the cube, and then you redirect the laser here and you activate that. The thing is, what a bunch of people did instead, and ultimately I didn't really care about this very much in comparison to other things, is you put 2 portals there, you awkwardly jump over here, and then you can... I think I got the portal swapped around. And then you can trigger the laser like that, if I can line it up properly. And this works, right? And I actually saw playtesters doing this, and I copied the solution for the second chamber. But it is a little janky, and if I wanted people to figure that out in the second chamber, I probably could have made this wall not portalable. If you haven't noticed by now, I am not a very good puzzle designer. That has never been my forte. My old Puzzle Maker maps suck ass. And it's just not a good time. I feel like if this were just a standalone map, it would have been really bad. Although, one thing that I did here that I kind of really like was how I reuse puzzle elements. That's something that I've always appreciated when maps do, when they are able to reuse puzzle elements. For instance, this button does 2 things. It sends up the lift, and it also flips this panel, allowing us to access this cube, which also, after doing the laser, allows us to put it on the button. In my opinion, less elements that are used in interesting ways go a lot further than more elements that just do one thing. So anyway, you come up here, and that brings us to our first sort of quote-unquote trippy moment. You spawn the cube, and then you pick it up, and this happens. Now, the way this was done is actually not too complicated. So when you pick up the cube, there is an output on it in Hammer, which triggers a logic relay, which triggers the whole sequence, right? And this logic relay is set to fire only once, so it's not going to happen the next time you pick it up. And the relay triggers a few things. First of all, it triggers what's called a player speed mod. Now, this is an entity that was made for Half-Life 2, and it's used in all the trippy G-Man sequences, which I drew a lot of inspiration from, to make the player, basically hold the player in place. And for some reason, the devs just up and left it in Portal 2, even though it's not used anywhere in the campaign, to my knowledge. But I was able to activate it here and make the player sort of move around slowly. Next comes the color grading, right? So that's pretty simple. We just have a color correction entity, which triggers a whole bunch of desaturation and contrast increases and stuff. And then finally, what really sells it is the sound design, right? So I trigger a soundscape here, and Portal 2's audio mixer is actually really powerful. So I'm able to trigger a soundscape that basically mutes all sounds, including physics, collisions, footsteps, etc., in the environment, except with one key exception, which is what are dubbed as UI sounds. And because of that, I was able to pack a sound file into the map that would play throughout this whole sequence, and it was just one sound file. I'm not doing any multiple sounds. In fact, the fizzle sound was actually baked into that sound file, which I created in Adobe Audition to fulfill the sequence. So yeah, anyway, so the next thing you do, again, this is an example of reusing puzzle elements. So you come down here and you actually swap the cubes and fail a cube throw to over here, apparently. I'm not going to be able to get that. So you come down here, and now this cube goes on the button. And that allows us to respawn the cube via the laser. And actually, the reason the laser was used in the first place is because you need to be able to respawn it from up here, and the Puzzle Maker doesn't let you have 2 buttons that do the same thing. And then we can move this cube over here. And given that this cube is still on the button, we can put a portal there and get the cube by catching it. But we encounter a second sequence. The cube freezes midair, the player can't move, and then black. And then the cube respawns and we can catch it. So This sequence was basically the exact same as the first one, with the side effect of the cube changing its behavior, and that was really simple. I just had an input which essentially disabled physics on the cube, causing it to freeze midair, and then it just teleports back to right under the portal and back onto the faithplate, and you catch it. And this actually had the side effect of allowing you time to prepare for the catch, because you see it there, you're like, I have to grab it, I can't grab it, and then the second time it flings, then you know you're supposed to grab it, which is, I think, helpful, because a lot of people, when I was initially playtesting this before I put any of the trippy stuff in, missed it the first time and then had to respawn it and grab it again. Here's another example of something that I had to add that wasn't in the Puzzle Maker version, just to signify that's what the player was supposed to do. But what's funny is a lot of people actually missed this, because if you've got your cube over here, you can actually do this. If you aren't an idiot and don't fail the jump. There we go. And if you do it like this, because the cutscene is triggered by the faith plate, actually, it completely bypasses this. And I thought it was okay at the time. I'm like, they miss one sequence, it's fine. It's actually harder to pull off this jump, as we just saw, than it is to just put it on the faith plate. Unfortunately, that came back to bite me in Chamber 3 when you can't do that, and now the player has not been trained that they can catch the cube from here. So anyway, you go here, and then you respawn. Bring this cube over here, and you've solved the chamber. Right? Well, you come into here, and whoops. So Valve, as a part of the Portal 2 SDK, provides a number of prefabs, or instances as they're called, for things like elevators and cube droppers and all the stuff that's reused throughout levels. So I started this area with the default elevator instance, except I stripped all the logic. Then, when the elevator comes in and the sequence starts, I fire an input on the elevator prop to basically set the animation playback speed to 0, which has the effect of stopping it in place. Then, in combination with the stripping of all sounds and the slowing of the player, it gives the impression that time has just completely frozen, except if you turn around and look at the fizzler, which is still animating, because that's a animated texture, and I didn't want to put in the effort to figure out how to get that to stop. And next, we spawn here. This is the first fully hammer area of the map, and I put a lot of effort into the look and feel of this. One thing you'll notice off the bat is that it's a lot more claustrophobic than behind-the-scenes areas usually are. And that's very intentional. I wanted to give this a much more grounded feel because, let's be real, Aperture is a little bit cartoonishly large, with all the arm walls and robotic shit and the tubes. I wanted to cut away all of that and keep it more feeling like a real place. That's why you'll never see any arm walls. It feels more like a hole underground rather than a big expanse. So you'll see things like the support pillar here and the trusses and the pipe. It's all very small. Another thing that took a lot of work is the lighting. I was really intentional with the lighting here, making it very dark, except for a very few number of key lights, which are very bright. So you end up with this thing causing blue light here, and then we've got a contrasting orange from this light. And then you come into here, and you'll notice it's all sepia toned. The sepia was also very intentional. That was done in color grading, and it gives it more of a feeling of dread, right? And you'll notice throughout this whole segment, there's actually a player speed mod active, making you walk slower than normal.
Oh no, you even scaled down the
And that was another thing I did to just make this feel wrong, right? As well as the emptiness, the lack of any human presence. And then you've got this door here, right? And we've got the bright light coming in the door indicating that the player is supposed to come through here because this will not open. And funnily enough, I actually had to recompile the door prop because this is originally only a prop dynamic, but the thing is prop dynamics don't play very well with very harsh baked lighting like this is. I would have used a projected texture, but that doesn't do bounce very well, which I really needed here. So you come in here, I probably could have detailed this a little better. You get the narrator pissed off because you're in the broom closet, and you trigger this. Now, this door is open, you can come over here, and we've got this creepy-ass fan. And there's actually no light up here, fun fact. I didn't bother because I couldn't really figure out how to get the in-flight light glow to work properly, and whatever. So then you come down here, and we've got another guiding light. I used a lot of Valve's techniques for guiding lights. I think it's really important. This guiding light indicates that you come in here, and now you hear the famous muffled voice. When doing this sequence, I took inspiration from the Ratman Den in Chapter 1, where you hear the mumbling through the wall, and only when going back a second time and trying to work out what they're saying, you can kind of barely figure it out. It turned out that people didn't like that. People wanted to hear it first time around, which I think makes sense. So, again, if I were to remaster, I would probably make this a little bit more audible so that you can understand what he's saying. And just for y'all who took the effort to watch this video, here's a little treat. Here is the original unmuffled audio if you wanna get a little listen to what I'm saying. Voice log number 23, it didn't work. I mean, he's not in the test chamber anymore, so that's a plus, but according to the Vorts, he's still here in some kind of limbo space in between our dimension and theirs. Probably a result of them using whatever technology they used to get him here in the first place to try to keep him here. So we're trying to figure out what to do next. As far as I can tell, if we don't do anything, he's just going to end up here again, continuing to hog up all our spaces and make Mr. Johnson angry. So I'm going to continue to work on this. Of course, this brings me to my next core idea, which is that there is, in fact, a lore here. I'm not just throwing in random, creepy effects for the hell of it. There is a reason that everything is happening. And some people have gotten close, but no one's quite figured it out yet. And no, I am not telling you the answers. But go ahead and just listen to the dialogue and also look at the workshop description, and hopefully you might be able to figure it out. So, once you're finished listening to this, or even if the audio is not finished, you can come out here, cut to black, and now we're back in the test chamber. Now, the second variation of the test chamber was made completely in Hammer, and I think the visuals show it. We've got much more detailed work here with the lighting on the laser. We have this move to the left properly. This dropper is the full-sized one, not the Puzzle Maker voxel-sized one. And the music, you'll notice, is the cut Puzzle Maker music. So, for Puzzle Maker maps, Valve designed a number of tracks, a random which is chosen when you play a puzzle, and they're all supposed to be sort of background music, right? Like, I'm calm, I'm relaxed, I'm solving a puzzle. Except there was also this one, which is still included in the game files, but will never play. But in this case, I think it totally worked. So I force it to play this, which is luckily still in the files, so I didn't have to pack it or anything like this. And the solution to this chamber is pretty much the same, although I did fix the laser issue here. Grab the cube, and now you'll notice the laser's a little bit closer in because you try to come up here. No portal surface to get the cube. So you have to do what playtesters were doing in the first one, where you throw it through here and you activate it that way. I do think it would have been a little better if I had stopped that from happening in the first version so that, you know, it was actually a puzzle to figure out here. I do think that the second version of the chamber was a little bit too samey. I do wish that I had spent a little bit more effort trying to make a new solution rather than just, because you already know the solution here. It's basically exactly the same with a few extra steps. So you grab the cube, come over here, and now the button's over here, so you have to do a fling, as if that wasn't obvious. You come back, you swap the cubes, you fail the throw again. You do the same thing where you grab the cube out of the air, you respawn, and this happens. And now you're in the observation room. So that cutscene was a little bit more complex to pull off. So first of all, what happens is we use the player speed mod again, but this time it sets the player's movement velocity to 0, which has the effect of freezing them in the air. Do the same thing to the cube. I disable physics on it so that it's frozen, right? Now, in the original version of this map, a Vortigaunt appeared on screen right in front of you. Now, what I originally wanted to do was to use a script intro entity and make the Vortigaunts kind of appear around you like in the episode 1 intro. Unfortunately, although it's still in the game, that entity was not updated very well for Portal 2's new HDR-based rendering engine, and when I tried to use it, I ended up with a whole bunch of exposure issues. So I had to cut it and use a end screen overlay instead with a pre-rendered image. But the problem with that was that Portal 2 disables those by default for some reason, so I had to use a point client command to re-enable it. But the thing is, a lot of people run mods that break those, and I think in a recent update, Valve actually just stopped those from working altogether, so unfortunately, no more Vortigaunt overlay, but the scene still works. Also, the reason I had to add that grate over there is because, while the cutscene still triggered if you did the ground fling, because it still ends with you flying up towards the platform with a cube in your hand, which is the trigger condition, it doesn't trigger when you do it from the laser area, and I couldn't make it trigger because of technical reasons I don't want to get into. There was also a cheese where you could land on the faith plate and chuck the cube onto the platform, and that would break the cutscene as well, so I had an invisible wall that I internally called Cheese Blocker to stop that from happening. And yet, with all of these precautions, someone apparently still managed to make it through the exit door and get stuck. I can't figure out how they did that. But yeah, anyway, so we come into the observation room here, and this is the same observation room that we saw from the test. That's why it's a lot more detailed than this one over here. And we come down here. And you realize that at the time, my environment design skills were not great. That's why there's a little bit of a lack of detail here, and ultimately, I do think that led a little bit more into the empty feeling than I was planning for it to. So it kind of worked out in the end. We also have this elevator here, which is a completely custom model made in Blender. This was actually based on the elevator from the Portal Stories Mel Junkyard, but that one was brush-based. I am not very good at working with brushes in Hammer. I still aren't. And that's why I decided to do this one in Blender, although this did come with its own technical challenge, given that Source 1 is not very friendly to model-based geometry like this, unlike modern game engines. That's why all the lighting inside here had to be pre-baked in Blender cycles. And then we've got this button that doesn't do anything. And now we come to the staircase. And you'll notice here we've got another example of leading lights, leading the player to come down here. But unfortunately, you can't get there because this is closed and we have no portal gun. So instead, we come up here to the creepy dark area. And I want to use this opportunity to talk about one of my pet peeves with horror, which is the overuse of jump scares, right? You'll notice, maybe aside from the Vortigons...
I hate that. Ah, fuck you. I hate you so fucking much.
We have no instances of jump scares yet in the map. It's all just tone, and that's really important, right? You see so many horror maps or so many horror movies that rely too much on boo. But the thing is, boo is not scary. It is startling. Instead, we just go for tone, right? We got the dark lights. We got the creepy sounds. That's what makes it scary, not any kind of jump scares. In fact, there's no jump scares in the map at all, essentially. But we do have the dark tone, which I think goes so much more into selling the mood. So anyway, you pick up the portal gun. The reason that we've got this little wood pallet here is because the portal gun needs to cast shadows on it, and it can't cast shadows onto props. I actually wanted to use originally a projected texture here again that would fix these vertex lighting weirdness issues. Unfortunately, as I said before, projected texture doesn't cast bounce light, and in this particular environment that's really important because this is the only light source in the room. So, you know, got to deal with Source Engine and its jank. Now that we've got a portal gun, we can come down here to the elevator power and attempt to turn the lights on. And this is not toxic goo. You can stand in this. I understand why people think it's toxic goo, because in the darkness it looks exactly like toxic goo, so I probably should have done a better job of figuring out a way to make the environment distinguish that. But you can just walk through here until you turn the light on. And now you can't. So, you have to turn it back off and find a way across. I saw some people attempt to parkour across this chair, which, you know, I guess would probably work. But that's why I left the chair there. That happened in playtest, and I'm like, you know what? That's impressive. I'm gonna keep that. But you just grab a cube over here, and you use that. Some people tried to use all 3 cubes, which, I mean, sure, like, you can do that if you really want, but it's just as easy to use 1 cube. So you turn the power on, you use the cube to jump across the water, and we're on the home stretch. Also, that's why these are here, to stop you from portaling across. You come on out, and the elevator light is on. Well, supposedly on. Here's the thing. As I said before, props do not handle baked lighting very well. And the amount of baked lighting in here is really specific and dynamic. I couldn't just turn on a bunch of light spots and call it a day. Instead, I baked this light in cycles again and converted it into a texture. But the thing is, prop static can't switch skins. So instead of switching the skin of this to have the light on, I added a little wrapper mesh, which you can see with this because I made it a little bit too big. And that's what contains the light using an additive blend. But it sells it. So you spawn the elevator. The elevator comes down. You get in. And funny enough, the elevator actually doesn't move. It's just a teleport, hidden by this little flicker in the lights. And something that I didn't catch during playtesting, because no one tried it, but apparently was tried after the fact, is you bring one of the cubes in here, it just disappears. because I didn't include it in the teleport filter. So that's a little oversight on my part. It doesn't really matter, though. So now we're in this little room. We open the door, and boom, we're back to the original space. We come in here. And this time when we come in here, you'll notice that the chair is on the ground and these lights are off. This is actually achieved with a world portal that just goes to a different area. You come in here, and this time, the door closes behind you, so you can't just leave. Unless you're that one person who decided to inch in and then run out like a little chicken and therefore missed the entire cutscene.
No, I know about that. I know. Will you just shut up and stop yelling and listen to me? No, don't fire me. Listen, if anyone's gonna get him out of here, it's me, okay? Hold on. Do you see that? Is he here?
And then we've got the star of the show. So that was probably the most in-depth sequence in the map, and it took me probably the most time out of all the map. The first thing I did was take the hammer room and export it into a separate file. I knew from the beginning that I wanted it to break away, so I made sure to keep it rather small with a bunch of really simple geometry and props. So I compiled the separate file, which is just the room itself, and opened it up into a program called Pragma Filmmaker. Pragma Filmmaker was a sort of somewhat failed attempt to recreate Source Filmmaker in an open source fashion, right? And I don't think it went anywhere, but critically, it's able to do two things. It's able to open up compiled source maps, and it's able to export GLTF files. And the GLTF file I was able to bring into Blender. These days, I probably would have used a tool called Plumber, which is what the TF2 trifecta used to bring all the TF2 maps into Blender, but I don't think that existed at the time. So anyway, once I was in Blender, I used an add-on called Cell Fracture to break the walls up into lots of tiny pieces. And then I turned each of those pieces into a rigid body, which I connected together using a series of breakable constraints. And then I lowered the gravity, added various force fields, and played with the other physics settings until I got them to swirl around the player. Finally, once I was done with the physics, I used a simple Python script to convert the rigid bodies into a set of animated armature-based models, with each bone for one piece. Each model was then exported back into the engine and applied to a prop dynamic, and there were several technical hiccups getting this to work, and I don't really want to get into those. And then, of course, the final piece of the puzzle was the lighting, sound design, and all the other effects that went into that, and it's basically the same approaches as before. And because Source doesn't handle lighting very well on dynamic props, you actually start the sequence in the original brush-based room, and then the light flickering out hides the teleport into the dynamic room. And once the walls break apart and there isn't a whole bunch of interior bounce lighting to worry about, projected texture and a few light spots, which are keyframed to turn on as the room breaks apart, are sufficient to light the scene. And of course, the whole thing wouldn't have worked without the proper build-up and cinematic suspense leading up to it.
Hey, Johnson again. Just a heads up, we've got an Intruder security breach in one of the test areas. Intruder security breach in one of the test areas.
And then comes probably the second most complex sequence in the map, which is this pre-animated cutscene. Now, Portal 2 has plenty of pre-animated cutscenes in it. That's nothing new. But the thing is, you can't pack those into maps. In fact, if you look at Portal 2 in the game files, those are all just BIK files sitting in the folder because they can't even pack them into the VPKs. So instead, I exported the After Effects project as an image sequence, right? And 15 FPS at fairly low resolution just to keep the file manageable because Source throws a fit if a texture is too big in file size. And then in VTF Edit, I turned those all into an animated texture, which then was applied to a wall inside a black room, a theater room, you could say, that had a view control in it to lock the player's camera. So the camera gets put into that room looking at a wall which has the video playing, or video, it's just a texture. And that is synced alongside a separate audio file which gets played and mixed in when you play the cutscene. And then finally, we're brought into this area, the final version of the map, and probably, aside from the destruction sequence, the most famous, because we've got the Puzzle Maker. Now, this sort of playing in the Puzzle Maker thing was actually an idea I had a long time ago when I was first learning Hammer. I was scrolling through all of the assets that I could place, and I found the Puzzle Maker assets, and I noticed that when you place them in-game, they're actually full size. So I'm like, what if I made a map you can play where I'm using these Puzzle Maker assets? Wouldn't that be fun? And lots of work to get it working, but it ended up working. And there's still some things like the laser, which I couldn't change, so that's still the stock asset. I probably could have made the footsteps sound a little bit more cartoony, but, you know, I'm doing something that you were not supposed to do. So we spawn the cube as before. It's back to blocking itself as before. We get it over here. And this is actually a remade, well, somewhat remade version of the cube model, because the original cube model, not a physics prop. So I had to decompile that, bring it into Blender, and, you know, do the stuff. We do the same thing as before, where this is just a toggle now. You put this here, and there's actually an issue where if the cube's on a laser, you can't really pick it up again. You have to move it first. That's a stock Portal 2 issue that I'm not entirely sure how they fixed it for the regular laser cube, but when it's the custom cube, it seems to be broken. So not really something I could deal with. I wish I could do something about it. Come over here. You jump the laser. You come stand on the button, and you'll notice the sounds are all different. The original button sound sounds very weighty, right? It's big, it's machinery, it's complex. But we can't really do that here because this is very lightweight. So instead, I looked through the game and I chose different sounds for almost everything in here. So in this case, this is the open and close sound from the Puzzle Maker. And the platform moving up and down is the rail sound from Wheatley when he's moving through the behind the scenes. I felt like that fit. We've also got this little icon here that you get in the Puzzle Maker, which turns itself off when the panel flips. And you bring the cube up, and oh no, it didn't fly over to me this time. It went back into the portal. And that's sort of pseudo-training for the cube juggling you're going to do later. You step off, and now we can get the cube over here. We put it on here as before. We take this up. This fizzler material was actually really hard to get working. And we try to spawn the cube. Comes over here as before. And oh shit, I can't do the fling anymore. What am I gonna do? Well, what I can do at least is get the cube down here. If I walk down to here, I can do the cube swap again. And I get it here. This can go on there. And then I can respawn the laser cube. But how to get it up here? Because I can't do the fling anymore if I don't freaking miss the faith plate again. Because now I do this, it's not coming towards me anymore. Now, this is where the puzzle gets a lot harder, and it got harder than it should have been, mainly because, and this is where the forgetting to make the floor black here really came back to bite me, because a lot of people at this point didn't realize that you were supposed to catch the cube here. Instead, well, they took a long time to figure it out because that's the only solution. Now, the solution here, what you got to do is, oh crap, I can't shoot a portal here yet. But if I respawn this, boom, I can get it. And now I've got a cube up here, and really you only need one cube up here to solve the test, because then you just put it on this button and you can just get the other one for free. Although for some reason, a lot of people forgot they had to do the cube swap and instead tried to have the regular cube doing the up and down flings, and then tried to do a really tight respawn on the laser cube and get it up here. Yeah, that's not the solution, and honestly, I don't know what I could have done to stop that. Anyway, now that we've got this here, and this here, we can come through, and we get the final cutscene. And this was really straightforward. It's just a couple of generic actors with the Vortigaunt model playing an animation that I made in Source Filmmaker. And the camera is just parented to a prop dynamic, also playing an animation I made in Source Filmmaker. And you know, you got the pre-made sound file, the lighting, and the fade out. And that's about it. So, that was sort of a little behind the scenes as to the Intruder. I hope you liked it. Again, thank you for all the positive feedback I've gotten on this map. I didn't expect it to do this well. And hopefully this gives a little bit of behind the scenes as to how it was all made. So yeah, thanks for watching. Comment, rate, subscribe, bringing back my old outro, and I'll see you next time. Okay, anomalous materials readings going down. How's it looking in there? Did we get him? Voice log number 25. We got him.